I think if more people knew how the law worked, what we just talked about, how hard it is to get status, I think we could work together. Because people think like, you are so lazy, you won't go fill out your form, or you won't get in line. If people knew there wasn't one, or do it the right way.
There's no line. Welcome, friends, to Tiny Pulpit Talks. I am so glad you joined us for this very special episode about something that is on so many of our minds. I'm Reverend TJ Fitzgerald, your Minister of Community Care and Engagement, and I'll let our guest introduce herself.
I am Jiroko Lopez, immigration attorney here in the DFW area.
Hi, Jiroko.
Hi, TJ.
So you probably picked it up. We are going to be talking about immigration issues, and we're going to get right into it. We could talk about your background, we could talk about all of this stuff, but one of the things I want to talk about first is a fundamental human right in this country. We have the red cards here at this church. For those of you who don't know what they are something that talks about the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment and the rights that people have on them. And people are asked to carry them around and potentially use them in different ways. Are you familiar with the red cards?
I am.
Are you familiar with the Fourth and Fifth Amendment?
I am.
Who is protected by the Fourth and Fifth Amendment in the United States?
So anybody who's physically present here.
That's right.
So it doesn't matter if you're a resident, a citizen, or undocumented, we all have the right to remain silent, right? And so, a lot of people fear, and I know we had been talking about, is just because you're undocumented, certain rights do exist here. You may not have the right to vote, right? But for example, one that I had talked about is if you are working here, even if it's unlawfully, labor laws still exist, right? So you still have to pay someone even if they're undocumented. There's still overtime laws, things like that. So if you are afraid and you feel that, you're being incriminated or anything like that, you always have the right to remain silent. And if you're too nervous, the words don't come out, the card's in English and in Spanish, and you can just hand it out.
Right.
Yep.
So if someone gets pulled over, say someone's at a stop, like I have a friend whose mom is here, undocumented, and if they get in a little car accident or there's something happens, they're really nervous.
Yeah.
And when they're detained, when they start asking questions, what does someone who's undocumented have to say to an officer, and what don't they have to say?
Sure. So let's kind of talk about the difference between state law and federal law, right?
Great.
So immigration is federal law, which is the law that's the same everywhere, right? Whether it's New York, Florida, California, the law is the same. But state law is the one that dictates traffic laws, right? So in Texas, if you are stopped, which is a detainer, right? So you're being detained, you're getting a traffic ticket, and they ask these three questions. You do have to answer them. So your name, your date of birth, and your address, they're required. If you don't say that, then it's a higher level misdemeanor, failure to ID, false ID, and you don't want that. So
never give a false name.
It's never going to help anybody.
It never helps. I know it feels like
you're nervous.
I know. Anyway, I just needed people to hear that.
Yes, no, it's true. And so when you are going to get a traffic ticket, right, always be polite to the officer. What they're trying to figure out is who you are, right? Because it's a danger risk to them, right? What if you're someone that's out for some sort of weapons charge or something, right? So they're making sure who you are. And then after that, if you start getting questions like, hey, do you have your social on you? Do you have your passport? That's when you can politely again say, oh, I'm sorry, am I free to go? Are you detaining me? And they're going to say yes or no. If they say no, that's it. You're free to go, drive normally, walk away if you're, no running or anything like that, right? But if they keep asking questions or you are being detained, then you have the red card, right? I have the right to remain silent. Criminal law attorneys, immigration attorneys will always tell you it's easier to defend somebody if they haven't incriminated themselves in any way.
Right, exactly. So those are some of the basics about those. I mean, this is an enormous area of law that touches on criminal, that touches on labor, that touches on other things, but I want to try to stay centered on some of these things that people can practically do and in their own life.
Yeah.
And in addition to understanding some of the basics about what to do with a detainer or in some other situation if they're stopped, what are some other things people should have around them? What are some really important things people might not be thinking of that they need?
Yeah. So right now, if you have no status, I think first you need a consult, right? Because if you're eligible for status, if there is a vaccine that's ever going to work, it's getting status, right? So if you have status, you can't be deported if you have status. So that's kind of one. Figure out if you're eligible for status. If not, you need to plan and prepare.
And by status, you mean like legal permanent resident or green card or
Yes.
resident or
Citizenship, yes.
any status. That's what status means.
And if you want, we can talk about how to get it too. But yes, so if you don't have any sort of status or a non-immigrant visa or some sort of visa, then you need to be prepared and have something at home, right? So buy a little safe, doesn't have to be expensive. Have your kids' birth certificates if they were born here. Make sure you have their, school records. Make sure that you have any medical records, showing that you've been here for 10 years, showing that you have good moral character. Because when we're called, everybody is stressed and your detained family member just wants to get out of there, right? And so the best thing you can do for your attorney is have everything in one very organized location so that when we need to request a bond, we're fast and we're ready to go.
Yeah, I have like a Sentry safe that's fireproof, and then I keep all of those documents inside a watertight Ziploc bag, because actually the water damage can be more of a problem than a fire when the sprinklers go off. And so anyway, I'm just throwing that out there, and I have it in a place that I can just grab it and head out.
That's the way to go.
Yeah, and I also have my baseball card collection in there. But I have like 100 Ricky Henderson cards. Anyway, which are actually worth something.
Good for you.
I don't know why I'm telling everyone I have these valuable things in my house. Anyway, we were talking about cards, and it came up. But in addition to having all those documents there, one of the things that an attorney at our church has talked about, if they need it, is getting help with, he's a probate lawyer, and getting help with, what would it be, like a power of attorney, something like that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So a long time ago, I don't know if you remember, in Mount Pleasant, Texas, there's a chicken plant there. And there was a huge raid years and years and years ago. And what happened is a lot of kids were alone at school. Nobody could pick them up. That's devastating, right? And so...
and since then, it's gotten a lot harder to pick a kid at school. For better.
Good reason, yes.
For better, but it is very hard to pick up a child at school.
Yes, and so what you need to do is have a power of attorney for someone you trust. And I'm going to say that word multiple times. Sometimes undocumented people will say, oh, hey, someone I know is a citizen. Well, you don't know if they have a conviction for child issues,
Right.
So you need to have somebody that you trust, even if they're undocumented. Obviously, it's better if they have some sort of status, but somebody that you know and trust. There's a Texas form that's free. It can be executed so that the parent, both the mom, the dad that are here, and the person you trust can execute this form specifically. Take it to the school ahead of time to make sure they would take it, but don't give it to the school because it is valid, right? So keep it in that safe, in that waterproof bag with all your baseball cards. Make sure it's in a place where the person you trust.
Because remember, and this is an important part, sometimes people working at the schools, they don't know that they're not supposed to take it, and they see a form and they take it, and you think it's on file and that you're good, but that's not the way the form works. You need to have it with you again later.
That's right. So some people say, oh, put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. Don't do that. It's going to be really hard to get. So let's say it's my aunt. I trust my aunt fully. Give her a key, right? Give her a key to my house, give her a key to the safe so that she can go and take it. Because again, this form can also help people make medical decisions.
Right.
That's a very big deal. So you don't want it executed, well, it's executed, but you don't want it to be used until you have to.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is property. People have amassed a lot of property, whether it's you own your home, you have land, a car, a bank account. And if you're detained and the bond money needs to get out, you need a power of attorney. And the best time to do it is now, because once you're detained, it's a no-go, right? So nobody wants to do this. I get it. Nobody wants to do it. But you need to do it ahead of time in case something happens or you're gone the day of tomorrow. Someone you trust can access those funds, or potentially you can do it internationally.
Yep. Yeah, there's so many things I know that are coming up on this. And I mean, these are some of the practical things, but I do want to say a word about what different kinds of statuses do mean. Now, I was in Hawaii for a long time, and there were a lot of pathways to different kinds of statuses because of Guam and the Philippines.
Yes, that's right.
And different, but here there aren't as many of those kinds of workarounds that you can get. So what are the pathways to status, some kind of protected status here, that people should be thinking about? And maybe they don't even know they're available. Some have to do with duration, some have to do with age and the relationship between those things. Can you say some about this?
So I'm going to go into 4 categories and ask me questions along the way. So the very first one that I hear a lot is people say, look, I love my nanny, I love my gardener, or I have a company and my steelworker is great, I want to petition for him, right? So that would be an employment-based petition, right? The thing is, if you've entered unlawfully, or you came in with a tourist visa and you've accrued what's called unlawful presence, you can be the most spectacular worker in the world. You could have won the Texas lottery, like an investment.
You could have 4 children. You could have everything.
Yes, but the thing is that with that kind of visa, those are the strictest ones. You have to go back to your home country and request a waiver. Those are some of the hardest waivers to get. So I've done consults with people who are undocumented and they started a restaurant, very successful, or a construction company. And I say, okay, go. And they said, what are my chances? Probably less than 5% you're going to get that. So you go out there, so basically a 95% chance you're going to lose it, right? So are you going to come, you're not going to be able to come back, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have a visa to come back. Your family's here, your business is here. We have no incentive for somebody to go. So even though, again, people bring me their nannies, they love them, they take care of their children, it is somebody they trust. There is no business-based visa that's going to be done here. They have to go abroad. There's a risk they're never going to come back. So that's the first category, right?
Right.
And the people who succeed are people abroad. So I helped a Canadian couple. They invested money here. They were doing it from there to here. They have no unlawful presence, right? Or a student who comes in and then a company wants to sponsor them. That's great, right?
Right.
But again, they came in with a visa. It's still valid. Let's talk about family-based. So I hear get in line a lot, right?
Yeah.
Or you have kids, or just, I had a lady that told me, just go file the document that you need to file at the Social Security office. I mean, if that were the case, truly everybody would do it, right? Everybody wants status. And so let's talk about family-based. If I am somebody that entered unlawfully, let's say 23 years ago, okay? I've got 5 US citizen kids, right? My husband's also undocumented. My parents live in Mexico. So if I come to the United States without a visa and my kids petition for me, my petition will be granted. They're just showing a family relationship. But I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to get residence based on them because I need a parent or a spouse that's a resident or citizen.
Okay, so the children aren't enough. You need a parent or a spouse who's
If you entered unlawfully, one time.
Right.
Let's say I entered unlawfully 30 years ago. I own a business, pay my taxes, I speak English, everything. I've got those 5 kids, right? I came in 30 years ago. 5 years ago, my mom said, or let's say 15 years ago, my mom's dying, literally, on her deathbed. Everybody's like, you need to go back to visit mom. I go, and I enter one more time unlawfully, never get caught. I've got the 10-year bar.
Yeah.
So I have to be outside the United States for 10 years.
Yeah.
No waiver for that.
Oh my gosh.
So that's family-based, right? And so sometimes people think it's going to be a guarantee. It's not. The people that this is mostly helpful for is if I came with a tourist visa, let's say I marry the love of my life who's a citizen, 10 years later, I will do an adjustment of status. That means petition, residence, I file it, 14 to 17 months, I get my status here.
Right.
But I entered with a visa, right?
And do you have to and if they overstay that
It's
visa,
still okay.
it's still okay.
That's right.
Because love wins in the end. Right.
If you came in with a visa.
If you came, love wins if you came in with a visa.
Yes.
That's going to be the title of this podcast. But yes, please go ahead.
But imagine the case of the spouse, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I came into the United States 30 years ago. I marry a U.S. citizen. He was in the Army, right? He's a veteran. And I had the same issue. My dad was dying. I go to visit him, and I come back. I've got the 10-year bar. It doesn't matter that my husband is a veteran, is a citizen. I'm never going to get it for 10 years, right? So a lot of people don't do that because, again, their family and everything is here. So that's family-based. Now, let's say we're siblings. You know, you're a U.S. citizen. I am from, I don't know, Croatia, right? The wait is about 16 years. If I'm Mexican, it's about a 23-year wait, right? But
what is the wait from? Just
there's a visa bulletin. You can Google it.
Okay.
It's divided into the Philippines, Mexico, China, India, and the rest of the world. Not kidding. That's the chart, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is, let's say the sibling example. So let's say I had a sibling petition for me in 2003, right? And I've waited my 23 years, but I entered unlawfully, and my parents and my spouse don't have status. It doesn't matter, I waited 23 years.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it.
So I'm giving you all the common things that happen, right?
But these are things that people might not know. They might be thinking and they're stuck like, oh, well, I entered illegally, so it's never gonna happen or whatever. And they just might not know that they have this path.
Yes, and many people, so if they do consults with me, I've done a statistic. So this is just this year, just because I pulled my own numbers, about 30% of the people I talk to are eligible for status, just this year.
Yeah.
So that means 70% are not eligible for anything. They're the ones getting the power of attorney documents, getting ready if they go to court. So we talked about family, we talked about investment. There's victim-based. So the reason I do so much outreach is a lot of people don't know about a juvenile visa.
Right.
So for it's kids that have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by one or both parents, and they created this under trafficking law because kids are vulnerable, they get trafficked, right? And so a lot of people don't know about this. So I had a consult this morning with a young man who aged out, and he's never gonna be eligible for it again. And it's hard, right? So if you know anybody in a school, in your church, in your neighborhood, like, contact anybody. There's nonprofits. So if you're like, I don't like this lady, that's fine. Like, seriously, there's places that do it for
me.
free.
I mean, if you don't like me, we have recommendations. If you don't like this,
but tell kids ahead of time because they will lose it. So there was a big change in '08 that kind of led to the generous interpretation of this. There's also visas for people who've been victims of violent crime. The reason is that people who are undocumented are afraid of calling the police. They're afraid the police is going to call ICE. And so I work with a lot of police departments because they're like, no, please call us. And so Congress noticed that this happens, right? If someone's abusing a child and nobody calls the police for whatever reason, they're going to keep doing it.
Yep.
Right? Any crime, thefts, like anything. And so to create a safer community and this path, so it's basically a 7-year wait to get a 5-year wait to get a work permit, and eventually 9 to 10 years to get a green card. So it's great, it gets there, but it's a slow process.
Still a slow process. And that whole time, you can't leave the country.
You can't, and at least for 5 years, you're not going to get a work card.
Right.
And so people desperately want them, or people will say, why don't you get a work card? If they would try to get the social if they could, like truly. And the last way, and I promise I'll give you a break.
No, it's good.
Is defensive in court, right? So when you're in deportation proceedings, there's something called cancellation of removal for people who are undocumented. And there's 3 requirements. 10 years here, good moral character, and you have to have a parent, a spouse, or a child that's a resident or citizen that will suffer extreme or extraordinary unusual hardship. So the case law basically says if everyone's healthy, you're probably going to lose the case because the judge is going to say, you know what, everyone suffers. You're probably going to get maybe less educational help, things like that. But everybody does that. So you have to show that somebody in your family, for example, maybe they have a serious disease, epilepsy, Down syndrome, autism. And so it creates this really weird system. And there's only 400 nationwide every year that are granted, allowed to be granted. They have a wait line too. But it's weird because as a human, we want our family to be very healthy. But if they're healthy, you're going to lose. And if they're not healthy, which you're like, man, so I have a case where, the dad had cancer, the mom had diabetes with many complications, like amputated limbs and stuff like that. We won the case. And they were so happy, but it's because of that.
Well, I had a case in Hawaii that I helped on where it was 2 parents and 2 children. The children were citizens because they were born here. Both parents were undocumented. And one of the children needed pretty much round-the-clock care, but there were 2 parents. And the judge was actually considering saying, well, you don't both need status. And I was like...
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, they were like, there's only 400. And so we can't give them to you both because one of you can stay here and care for the child, and you could actually take the healthy child back. This was happening in court. And so in Hawaii, I would go to these hearings in my collar just to shame the judge into acting like a decent human. And so that one ended up, both parents did get to stay because of the profound illness of the child.
And the judge is pretty limited, to be honest, also.
Oh yeah, it's not like they can just capriciously, because people don't know that, a lot of people don't know immigration court is an administrative proceeding.
It's not an independent Article 1 court, Yeah,
and I hope this isn't too much lingo, but it's like a trademark court, or like something that's inside the Commerce, but it's inside the Homeland Security, and they are essentially employees of the Department of Homeland Security. But you can appeal things from immigration court, some things directly to the circuit court, and then other things to the district court if you need to.
That's right. And so I think one of the things that blows people's minds are that there's no jury. Like we see TV, right? We're like, okay, there's a jury. There's no jury.
No jury.
Right? And so the executive branch, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, but the executive is in charge of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. They are literally the same branch. So the prosecutor and the judge are on the same payroll,
the same person signing their checks.
Yeah, so it's a little different. And I didn't practice, in different courts, but from what I hear from my friends, right, who do civil and criminal work, like the judge can cross-examine your witness at any time and all the time.
Yeah. Oh my God. I had a trial in Connecticut. Judge Arterton is a brilliant jurist. And, you know, we got someone great on the other side, and she did not care. And she would just go right to town on some of the witnesses who she didn't trust or whatever. And you will never see that in immigration court. Yeah, it is wild. And what I observed, and I don't know if it's like this in Texas, the lawyer for the government will have their laptop with Westlaw or LexisNexis open. They'll literally be searching cases to try to come up with stuff. In Hawaii, you weren't allowed to have a laptop.
Oh, really?
And you could have a laptop, but you couldn't connect to the internet.
Oh, interesting.
They wouldn't let the plaintiffs or the petitioner lawyers connect to the internet. So you had to come either with some kind of portable,
it's like a law school exam,
internet device. I know, it was really, but it's not even trying to necessarily be fair. It's stacked.
That's what I think, right?
Yeah. I don't want to get you in trouble. No, I'm a pastor, and I'm saying I think it's stacked.
Yeah,
but impartial jurist, what do you think?
It's hard. So I'm biased, right? Yeah. The reason I became an attorney is because I saw how undocumented people were treated in work environments. I did not become an employment attorney, right? But I was just, these people are so scared. And so I think the thing is that we always kind of put them into one group. Oh, you know, they came in without a visa. I'm like, trust me, if they could have gotten a visa, they would have gotten a visa, right? It's
anything to get a visa.
Yes, yeah. And if you think of people who cross the border, so my mom had an issue with it. She's like, as a parent, why would you let your child cross the border? And I'm like, Mom, imagine how hard that life was abroad, that was somehow safer to do that.
Yeah, to get on a train with strangers and ride it here. Yeah.
And so I think that's asylum. So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah, that's where I was going next.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So asylum is for people who fear persecution in their home country for one of 5 grounds, right? And I didn't make it up, it's in the law. So it's race, religion, nationality, ethnic group, political opinion, social group. So I think easy examples are, we have a lot of Egyptian clients. So I don't know if you know, but there's Coptic Christians in Egypt, and extremist Muslim groups try to persecute them in many different ways, burn their business, their home, hurt them, things like that. And the government does nothing to protect this group. They're more on the side of the extremist Muslims, right? And so that's a clear asylum. They are persecuting you. Why? Because of religion, one of the 5 grounds, right? Another example I have is a man who is a judge, entered in with one political party. That political party lost the next election. Then another political party came in, they took him out of his position, they put him in jail, and they tortured him. That is solely because of his political opinion, right? So many people who flee to the United States are fleeing massive violence. So for example, a lot of Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, you have the cartels there, in the other countries you have the gangs. And these people are being extorted and they're being killed, right? So you have to pay towards me, and if you don't, I'll kill you or I'll rape your daughter, or whatever it is, right? Or
and
your
you have
kid
to
has
let
to
you have to let your child join our gang.
That's exactly right.
That's the big one. And that's where there's a lot of sticking points on that law and the local authorities won't enforce the actual law that's there.
There you go.
That is the crux. Yeah.
So the fear is there, but it's not based on one of the 5 grounds. And our law doesn't protect a 6th ground. Like, I touch ground, I'm going to be killed. That's great, but it's not one of the 5. So many people don't understand. Some people may request asylum, but they may never get it. It may not be granted. And that's the difference from an asylee versus a refugee. Right now, we don't have a refugee program anymore, but previously the UN would decide, okay, you are being persecuted, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And this raises so the person I worked with in Hawaii worked at the UN, and so he knew a lot about, before he retired to Hawaii and helped there, but he worked more with refugee resettlement. And then got into other areas. But one of the things he used to say is that in the 90s, there was almost a comprehensive immigration law reform that was very nearly passed, but both sides of the aisle, no matter who you are, they both decided that politically it was better to keep this political football in play for both of their political futures. And so it never came to pass. And now even he and I and others wonder, is there some kind of comprehensive immigration reform that is possible?
So the last one we had, so when you mention time, people think of amnesty, right? You've been here for a certain amount of time, you have no criminal history. That was back in Reagan, like in 86, right? I think, this is just my opinion, I hope you don't get in trouble or anything like that.
I can't get in any more trouble with anyone watching. Clearly you have not watched these. No, I'm kidding. But
I think, and again, on both sides of the aisle, you are super left, super right. I think if more people knew how the law worked, what we just talked about, how hard it is to get status, I think we could work together. Because people think like, you are so lazy, you won't go fill out your form, or you won't get in line. If people knew there wasn't one, or do it the right way.
there's no line.
I think we would truly so I will give you an example. I spoke to somebody in my building who's very, very staunch conservative. She knows what I did. We had a very, politic talk. And I said, look, let me tell you a little bit about what I do. And she literally told me, she said, I had no idea. I thought, that was the example. I thought people wouldn't go to the Social Security office to fill out their form. And I told her, I promise, Now, again, immigrants are not one big group.
Right.
They're just like everybody else. There are some people that commit crimes, right? And that's not okay. But I think for the people that have been here for a while, who contribute, who pay their taxes, many of which speak English, right? Their kids are here. They haven't been in their home country for 20 years or more.
They're paying into Social Security that they're never going to get.
Yes,
I mean,
pay
that
taxes,
alone is like,
property taxes, It's just, I think there are certain ways to interpret the existing laws that can help us get people to have status. That's personally what I think. But I do think we need a comprehensive reform. But I think unless we have the buy-in of both sides understanding what the law is like. Right now,
the constituents understanding.
Yes.
The people who are getting elected, no. They get it. But the constituents don't. And this is one of the black boxes of politics, I think.
So I had a political science professor who always told me, he said, Jiroko, people go to work, they're tired, they have a spouse, they have kids, they need to pay their bills, they need to wash their dishes. Everybody is tired. Why on earth are they going to care about? So I'll give you another example. I spoke to a young man whose parents are undocumented, and I did this talk with him, and I said, what do you think about right now? He's like, oh, I guess I hadn't thought about it. And to me, I'm like, man, like his parents have no status, and I talked to his parents, they're not eligible for anything. But I think we need to take an interest, because more of the people than we know in our community.
Totally.
And they're scared.
I know.
TJ, they're so scared. I talked to a woman who I helped her kids get DACA. So DACA is a work permit. It never leads to residence or citizenship. It's a promise not to deport. President Obama created it in 2012. And it was never the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act never passed, right? And I've been helping her kids since 2013. She's not eligible for anything, been here for years, delightful, no criminal history, everything like that. And she was full of rashes.
I know.
And she said, it's because I'm so stressed, just driving to work and come back. I don't do anything.
Yeah.
We just need to know. What's the answer? How do we get more people to know? Maybe you guys can solve
We're
the problem.
starting here,
Listening
share
to the
this with people.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's part of it, is taking it. I think whenever I see a system that is so intricately and like almost impenetrably complex, someone's winning. Someone's winning that game, and it's none of the people who were stuck in it.
It's the detention center right now.
Well, it's the
Millions.
I mean, in Hawaii, it was a whole thing about the ankle bracelets and the amount of money it costs to keep one, the ICE bracelets. I mean, we can go on and on about who's benefiting, but I think following the money is an important part of this, but getting educated about this and really thinking, because when we talk about, this is one of the things I think about, maybe I should just preach about it, but knowing your rights we think know your rights means for immigrants and for refugees and for asylees. I think more of us need to understand what our rights are. Know your rights events should be like,
citizens,
y'all people with power, go figure out your rights and how far you can push those and protect the most meek and the most vulnerable and the people who are really just trying to, in my case, think about, we had a case with a trans woman who was abused by an ICE detention center, had a bullet in her thigh, and had all of these things to get there and couldn't even meet the refugee or the asylee, but did get temporary protective status.
That's good.
And partly it was through the work thing, but when you keep talking about the no criminal history, the other thing is look, people are people, and sometimes to get done what you need to do to live and to eat and to eke out a living, you might run afoul of an ordinance here, and that, or working without, exactly. And so that's the other thing that I start to feel about is is this a purity test? It's I know now we're getting philosophical, but it's did I keep a clean sheet? Is it enough that that now I get this thing because these two things I had to do. I stole a loaf of bread to save Mr. Son, to quote Les Miserables.
Yeah.
And now I can't have this. It hurts my heart.
So I work with a lot of juveniles, and I mean, I had this young man he's homosexual, and his stepfather hated the fact that he was homosexual, and he didn't cope in a healthy way, and he was drinking, and he drove drunk. And I know that's not good because he could have killed somebody,
Sure.
could have killed himself. And it's just, he can't make that mistake. He lost his DACA, right? But as citizens, we can make it. And I did nothing, TJ, to be born here. Like,
Amen.
I don't deserve it, but I am here. And nobody picks it. I'm sure everybody would,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is how it feels to work in your role. We haven't talked that much about what it is, but like in any given moment, you're thinking on 3 levels. You're thinking the practical, tactical, like how do we get this done? You're thinking with your heart about how did this happen? And then philosophically, it's like, we are just where we were born. So much of these borders that we have in the world dictate so much of our future and what we are able to accomplish and how we're able to protect our families or even have one for that instance. And I can't imagine, I've done some of it, but to do it on a daily, hourly, yearly basis must be really taxing.
Again, I hope you don't get in trouble, but it's hard with administration changes, just being very honest. So I know we were talking about, the Department of Homeland Security and stuff like that. I've worked with prosecutors. So a prosecutor's job is to see, is someone deportable, right? It's not to deport everyone.
Yeah.
And so I've worked with prosecutors who are like, wow, like I see this, right? And this person is eligible to stay. I'm not going to object because they're eligible to stay in this country. And then there's others that do everything to just possibly, right? Yeah. But you meet that in everything. You meet that in plumbers and teachers and doctors, right? Yeah. So it's
ministers. Oh, sorry.
No, man.
Stop preaching already. Anyway, but yeah.
I don't even know where I was going.
It's
hard.
Yeah, it's hard. You think you're going into a meeting with someone and you're going to have some kind of reasonable conversation. You realize you got an ideologue who's got this kind of idea that anyone who doesn't fit into some kind of mold or doesn't follow this thing has got to be gone, eradicated, whatever. And it can make you kind of wonder about humanity.
I think that's what's scary with this specific situation with immigration, because that one branch has so much power. Again, so one thing that the Biden administration had was what's called prosecutorial discretion. Right. So we all have discretion. I have discretion to color my hair purple, whatever it is, right? So prosecutors have discretion to say, hey, look, I'm going to dismiss this case for this and this reason. The current administration got rid of that, right? Like they want everybody out. And so I think that's also hard for some prosecutors because they're like, well, like this, we could have dismissed this case and now I'm fighting it. And they're having their own like issues, right? Doing that.
Yeah.
So
those are, I won't say there's good, there are, but there's people who are civil servants who got into this because they wanted to be part of the solution from the inside. Yeah. And I praise, I respect, I bless people who took on that really arduous task. And, I have friends who've had to leave their departments that don't touch this area, but they just can't take it anymore. And others who are staying, they're in their own conflict. It's a very hard thing.
I would say the one big difference I've noticed, so it's a very rewarding feel because you can help someone. Like imagine a kid who can for the first time like go to college and like, it's beautiful, right? Somebody who is working under the table can be like, it's a fresh new life. Yeah. So that's the beautiful part of it. I will say the negative part of it for the first time in my career, where before I would say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you, like here's some things. I'm frustrated. And this is first world because they're like, well, you're a frustrated girl, like you were born here, but they just look at me and they're like, what am I going to do? Like I just drive home and I drive to work and I don't have anything to tell them. Like they're like, I have no anything. And I'm like, I am so sorry. Like here's my number. And for some people, even if you call me, like the best I can do is get you a voluntary departure and you have to leave anyway. So I think before, personally, I think we were more reasonable. We're like, look, you've been here for a while. You're trying your best. You haven't done anything like, crazy. We'll give you a second go. But that's out the table. I think that is hard this time.
Yeah, there was a feeling of that. And I don't know the landscape here as much, but in Hawaii, like, the people doing this were just a little more, a lot of them were Hawaiian and they weren't going to mess with other Hawaiians. There's like stuff like that going on, but here, I don't really know what that must be like. So
I think if I can ask a favor of people who I'm not even like regularly on this podcast, is tell everybody about how this process works. Tell them, if you like me, like I'll go talk to them. If you don't like me, he'll find someone else, you know? Like you need to tell everybody you know how this works, because only that we will be the change.
The other thing I want to say about that, and I know we've gone on way longer, thank you all for watching this long, is that there are fewer and fewer places willing to hold Know Your Rights events. We are seeing it everywhere. Churches, schools, anything that even smells political right now are being shut down. And if you are at a place that can hold a Know Your Rights event, and maybe we call it something else.
We do.
We call it, you know, the fun day of learning or whatever, we'll do it, right?
Sure.
Let us know. We will find someone to come and do a Know Your Rights for you. Right?
Yeah, and give free information. We know the nonprofits in the area. Like, we will provide the resources so people get the help they need.
Right below here, actually, you'll have some links that have already been provided, and we can, you know, have some contact and resources, things like that. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I know this was just a little portion of how much is going on in this area, but I know many people want to learn about this, and if you want to learn more, please do more research. Please contact us.
Sure, contact us.
And we're going to help you. So
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, and thanks all of you for tuning in. If we don't see you before then, we'll see you on Sunday, although you don't come to our church, so maybe one of your friends is watching, and we'll see you in your church on Sunday.
That sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So long.